It's kind of rainy and snowy and cold here in northern Utah right now. I guess that's what you get in November, I guess. But I thought I wanted to take a chance to talk about why a person would want to do a solid axle conversion on their vehicle. Um, I think if you want to be pretty blunt about it, look underneath here. See all this caked red mud on the bottom of my truck? That red Moab mud. Look what it can take you to go do when you do it. Look how much fun you can have, how much exploring you can do when you've done a solid axle conversion. Now, the more practical points are going to be things like strength. The factory independent front suspension is very weak. Even just simple basic off-roading will have failures of things like CV joints and tie rods, ball joints on the control arms. And that gets really annoying even if you're just, off-roading it in basically stock form. So it's important to put something strong enough that'll let you get out to where you want to go. You may not need something super extreme like some of these other trucks. Maybe you want to just explore and have the comfort of knowing that you're not going to break and be stranded in the middle of nowhere. That's where the Tahoe overlanding axle swap comes in. Unlike any other solid axle conversion, you are able to convert to a solid front axle and keep it much lower to the ground than most other solid axle conversions will allow. And while having all the strength that you would gain by having a solid front axle. For example, the ball joints on the knuckles of a solid front axle, all they have to do is handle the pivot of steering. They're not like independent suspension where they handle the pivot of steering and have to handle the other plane of pivot for the suspension movement. So ball joints just inherently are going to last longer and be stronger because they only have to do one job, not two. And they're stronger, beefier ball joints. Look at the steering links here. They're much more beefy and strong because they don't need to have several pivot points on them to articulate with the independent suspension to avoid bump steer. If you look at some of the other benefits that you'll find is an independent suspension truck, the two tires move up and down and stay relatively parallel to one another. So as you approach a side hill, one tire goes up, one tire goes down. You're only going to get the edges or part of the tires contacting that terrain. But with a solid front axle, it's able to articulate and follow the side hill and get more contact. Now, that's not true in all circumstances. Obviously, independent suspension does have its benefits. High speed and not needing to articulate very far is going to be where independent shines, specifically the street. Independent suspension is designed for the street. And if that's not enough for you, like most of us who even drive on basic dirt roads, solid front axle is your next step. Independent suspension is also limited in how much it can articulate, just the travel it has. You'll gain so much more articulation with a solid front axle, like I showed in this video over here, than you will independent suspension. Now, probably my favorite part of this swap is the coil springs and the long radius arms. Those achieve such a soft and plush ride that it's an improvement over the torsion bars by far. If for no other reason than to have a softer, more plush ride, that's a good enough reason to swap in a solid front axle in my mind. Just that much of an improvement. Every person so far that's done this swap has contacted me and told me that it was a marked improvement over their factory ride to do this conversion. And that's on the street even. So, I think it's important to also look at other things like the impact resistance of this big, beefy, solid steel assembly as opposed to the thin stamped steel and cast control arms, tie rods, and components that were in the independent suspension. And I'm actually loathing having to clean off all this Moab mud, because look how much is up under here. Look how much I was able to go and do and enjoy in this truck. And that's this has been like this. It's been 2 or 3 weeks since I got back from Moab. I've been kind of lazy to clean it up, but this swap has been done on this particular Tahoe for 2.5 years. I've 70 or 80 plus wheeling trips at this point on this Tahoe, and I've had no strength failures as of yet. And I've gotten to explore some very amazing places, some very cool places, beautiful places, unique places, distant places, hundreds of miles of dirt at a time. And I can only do that because I have performed the Tahoe overlanding axle swap. And it's not terribly expensive compared to other axle swap options. Most people that do this swap, between the cost of parts purchasing from Tahoe overlanding and the cost of other parts, usually costs between $3,000 and $4,000 to do the swap. That's actually not bad, seeing as how other companies sell parts kits that are that much money just for the basic bracket components. You haven't even bought an axle for that much money. So this swap allows you to retain your factory wheels. It allows you to retain your anti-lock brake function. It doesn't require you to change out anything like that. And even the other 6-lug axle conversions that are out there that utilize the manual locking hub Dana 44s, those require you to change your wheels because they have such a large center hub that your factory wheels won't accept the larger center bore hub. So this is kind of a no-brainer for someone who actually doesn't want to be extreme, who wants to keep your center of gravity low, wants to, explore and enjoy their vehicle without it being an expressly off-road only rig. This is something that most people use as their daily driver after they've done the swap. I don't. This is a wheeling only rig, but you could keep it as your daily driver with no problems at all. It's a very easy and simple swap. I don't get up under it a lot these days and look. I'm just kind of inspecting some of the post-mortem from Moab, see if anything, massively got broken or damaged. Doesn't look like it. Now, the next question is, why wouldn't you want to use like a 1-ton axle set? Why wouldn't you want to use a Dana 60 in the front? Well, you could, but what makes this axle stay so low to the ground with the swap is that you're able to take this axle, tuck it, as the suspension compresses, this axle tucks upward and fits so nicely right in here along the oil pan and everything. And a larger Dana 60 axle housing is much thicker all through here. So you sacrifice 1.5 to 2 inches in upward travel as soon as you put that axle in. It's also about an inch and a quarter lower down here. So you're losing 1.5 to 2 inches of upward travel and about 1.25 inches of underside axle obstacle clearance. That's substantial. That is really substantial. And when you look at it, this swap, when it's lowered down onto the ground, you actually have, on this one, for example, in the standard Tahoe overlanding configuration, it has roughly 4.5 inches of upward travel at the bump stops when at ride height. 4.5 inches. That's a lot compared to most factory solid axle vehicles who have less than 2. So not only is it this low to the ground, but it also has substantial upward suspension travel while still being that low to the ground. Now, I was over at a friend of mine who lives here local, that he's got a Suburban with a Super Duty Dana 60 axle swap under it, and he has the WFO Concept swap performed on it. And he's running 39-inch tall tires. He's pretty tall. He's got a really cool Suburban, probably one of the coolest Suburbans around. But at 39 inches of tire and that much lift, he has less than 2 inches of suspension travel at the bump stops at ride height. His center of gravity is probably 7 inches higher than this one and has half the upward travel to go along with it. And that's what you need to look at when you're considering a solid axle conversion is, do you want it just to look cool? Do you want to say, hey, I've got 1-ton axles? Then yeah, go a different route. But if you wanted to do a 1-ton axle, this Dodge 2nd-gen Ram axle also had the 1-ton Dana 60 in it. And you would have to go to 8-lug at that point. You can't have a 6-lug Dana 60, but you could do all of the same swap, same coil mounts, same spring, same steering, everything with the Dana 60.
Plus, going with the Dodge axle, you don't need $820 worth of hubs to convert it to 8 on 6.5 like you would with the Ford Super Duty axle.
And so that's what you want to do. You could do that too. And it's just as easy. You just do lose some of that upward travel that I was talking about, some of that underside clearance that I was talking about. But it's worth it to you if that's what you want. You know, it's not worth it to me. I'd much rather have the more nimble, flexible Dana 44 that has yet to break on me. You can see I've got 35, 12, 50, 17 tires on it, and I wheel it plenty hard. Haven't broken anything yet. I haven't even broken a U joint, a ball joint. I have replaced the tie rod ends, though. I have done that. And I've changed the fluid on it, but that's it. And I have, you might see, here's the wires coming out for my e-locker. So it's fully locked. It's not even an open diff. And as you know, lockers do raise the risk of breaking parts, and I still haven't broken parts yet. So just something to consider. There are multiple options for doing a solid axle conversion. And this one will be your least expensive and most comfortable riding and get you the most upward travel and therefore lowest center of gravity if you want that. Now, if you want to raise it up really high, awesome. If you want to have a high center of gravity, have big tires, do it. You'll just end up with even more upward travel, even more performance. And so it's sort of a no-brainer.